The invitation sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I could bring myself to touch it. Ivory cardstock, heavy and expensive, with elegant gold trim. My name, Scarlett Lane, was written in a flowery script I didn't recognize. No return address, of course. Just a stark, formal announcement of a wedding. Daniel. Even his name felt heavy in my chest. Daniel James Walker. Getting married. To someone named Victoria. My first thought, absurdly, was that it was a mistake. A wrong address, maybe. Who sends an invitation to the ex-fiancé? The woman you walked out on in the darkest moment of her life? But deep down, I knew it wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. A statement. A final, definitive erasure. He wasn't just getting married. He was cementing the fact that the life we'd built, the life we'd lost, was officially, legally, permanently in the past. And I wasn't part of his future. Looking at that envelope, I was instantly transported back. Not just to the end, but to the beginning, to the middle, to the 6 years I spent building a life with Daniel. We met in a coffee shop, cliché I know, but it felt like fate then. He was charming, funny, attentive. He had this easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, something Uncle Bill always pointed out, but I thought it was just him being deep back then. He came with baggage, of course. His daughter, Chloe. Her mother wasn't really in the picture, hadn't been for years. Chloe was 5 when she came to live with us full-time. A tiny thing with wide, uncertain eyes and a mop of curly brown hair. I was nervous, Daniel was nervous, everyone was nervous. But from the second she tentatively reached for my hand the first day, something just clicked. She didn't call me Mom or Mommy right away. It was always Scarlett. And that was fine. More than fine. I wasn't trying to replace anyone. I was just there. But slowly, over months, as I braided her hair before school, helped her with homework, read her bedtime stories, tucked her in, dealt with scraped knees and bad dreams, something shifted. My love for Daniel felt big. Yes, but my love for Chloe was different. It was fierce. Protective. It wrapped itself around my heart and became a part of my identity. Then, one quiet evening, she was drawing at the kitchen table, her tongue sticking out in concentration. I was making dinner. Out of nowhere, she said, "Mommy, can I have more red crayon?" My hand froze over the saucepan. Mommy. I didn't correct her. I didn't make a big deal. I just said, my voice a little shaky, "Of course, sweetie. It's in the box." But inside, a whole universe shifted. In that moment, I stopped being just Scarlett who loves Daniel. I became Mommy to Chloe. I belonged to her. We were a family. A real one. Not just Daniel and me, but the 3 of us. That bond, the one with Chloe, was stronger, more fundamental than anything I had with him. And then came the loss. Our baby. A girl. We had names picked out. A nursery planned. We were due in a month. It was sudden, unexpected, devastating. One day, glowing and uncomfortable, the next, empty. Grief is a strange thing. It can bring people closer, or it can rip them apart. For Daniel, it was the latter. He didn't cry with me. He didn't hold my hand through the endless, silent nights. He withdrew. Became cold, distant. His easy smile vanished completely, replaced by a hollow stare. He barely spoke. The apartment, once filled with nervous anticipation and Chloe's laughter, became a tomb of silence and unspoken grief. He called it sadness. He said he couldn't live in this sadness anymore. He said I was too sad, too broken. Like my grief was a disease he could catch. Like it was my fault. He left 3 months later. In the middle of the night. A hastily packed duffel bag, a note on the counter that basically reiterated the can't live in sadness excuse, and he was gone. He didn't look back. Not at me. Not even at Chloe, asleep in her room. But here's the thing. He didn't just leave me. He left her too. His daughter. The little girl who had just started calling me Mommy. Who he was supposed to protect, to love, to raise. He left her. 4 months, I was a ghost in my own life. Waking up was like wading through cement. Every corner of the apartment held a memory, a phantom limb of the family we almost were, or the one he abandoned. Friends, even Jessica, who I thought would understand, slowly faded away. They didn't know what to say, or maybe my grief was too heavy for them. Jessica stopped calling after I canceled dinner the third time. Eventually, I stopped answering the phone at all. I stopped looking in mirrors. The broken woman Daniel described? That's exactly who I felt like. But there was Chloe. Still there. Not by accident. By choice. She was 11 then. Confused, hurting, but still needing me. I was a mess, shaking with anxiety over bills I couldn't pay, drowning in a grief that felt infinite. There were nights I'd hide in the bathroom, sobbing silently so she wouldn't hear. One evening, I was sitting on the cold tile floor, clutching a final demand letter, feeling utterly defeated. Chloe knocked tentatively. I didn't answer. The door creaked open anyway. She saw me huddled there. She didn't ask questions. She didn't tell me to stop crying. She just walked in, a slightly squashed peanut butter sandwich on a plate in her hand, and sat down quietly beside me. She held out the sandwich. "You forgot to eat," she said, her voice small. That was it. No grand pronouncement. Just a sandwich and her quiet presence. But in that moment, I knew I wasn't alone. I wasn't responsible for just myself anymore. If she wasn't giving up on me, I couldn't give up on myself. It took time. Years. Therapy, awful minimum wage jobs, late nights reading self-help books under a cheap lamp. Slowly, painstakingly, I started to feel human again. I picked up freelance design work again. Logos, websites, anything to make ends meet. I moved us into a smaller, cheaper apartment closer to Chloe's school. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was ours. We built it piece by piece, just the two of us. I even started to laugh again. Real laughs that shook my ribs. They were rare at first, fragile. But they came. And then the invitation arrived. A heavy, formal symbol of the life Daniel had gone on to build, leaving ours in ruins. I left it on the counter for days, a constant, unwelcome reminder. Until Chloe picked it up. She was 16 now. Tall, strong, with a quiet intensity in her eyes that both mirrored and surpassed my own resilience. She read the invitation aloud, her voice steady. "You should go," she said, placing the card back down. I stared at her, baffled. Go? To Daniel's wedding? Why? To watch him marry someone else? To feel like the broken woman he abandoned all over again? She looked at me, her expression calm-wise. "Not for him," she repeated. "For you. And for me." She paused, then added softly, "So he sees what he lost. And so you know, standing there, that he didn't break you. You put yourself back together without him. And we built something real." Her words hit me with the force of truth. I was still acting like the woman he left behind, the one who needed to hide. But Chloe saw the woman I had become, the one she helped save. "Okay," I said, the words surprising me. "Okay, we'll go." Just saying it out loud felt like stepping onto unstable ground. Go to Daniel Walker's wedding. The man who had been my whole world, the one who built dreams with me, who then vanished like smoke when grief became too much for him. The man who hadn't just left me, but had left his own daughter. Chloe's eyes softened, a flicker of relief there. She gave me a small, rare smile. "Good," she said quietly. "It's time." Deciding was one thing. Planning was another. I called Uncle Bill that night. He's my mom's older brother, the one who stepped up when she passed away years ago. Gruff exterior, softest heart you'll ever know. He never pretended to like Daniel. "His smile doesn't reach his eyes, Scarlett," he'd said once years ago. Watch that one. Turns out Uncle Bill was right. I explained the situation, the invitation, Chloe's insistence, my hesitant agreement. There was a long pause on the line. I could almost hear him chewing on his cigar, though I knew he'd quit years ago. It was his thinking noise. "Daniel's getting hitched, huh?" he finally rumbled. Figured he'd land on his feet somewhere soft. Always did. Another pause. "And he sent you an invite." That boy's got nerve. "Chloe wants me to go," I said, focusing on that part. She thinks it's important. "Chloe's usually right," he conceded. "Smart kid. Takes after her, well, not Daniel." He cleared his throat. "You want me to drive?" My chest loosened a little. "Would you?" "I don't think I can." I don't want to drive myself. Be ready Saturday morning, he said. I'll sit in the back with you. Don't gotta talk to nobody you don't want to. That was Uncle Bill. Simple, practical support. A solid rock when I felt like sand. His willingness to go, just to sit with me, meant the world. Chloe had her own plan brewing, one she revealed a few days later. I got a job, she announced casually over dinner. Working catering for a big event this weekend. Pays really well for one night. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Catering? This weekend? Chloe, that's Daniel's wedding. She met my gaze, unflinching. Yep. Ridgewood Events Catering. They handle all the big stuff at the Grand Hotel Ballroom. Needed extra hands for a massive wedding reception. She shrugged, trying for nonchalance, but I saw the determination in her eyes. Needed the money, you know? For stuff. Plus, she added, her voice lower, it means I'll be there. Just around. I knew what she meant. She wasn't just earning money. She was coming with me, in her own way. Blending into the background, yes, but present. A silent guardian angel in a server's uniform. It was classic Chloe, fiercely protective, practical, and unwilling to let me face anything truly difficult alone anymore. I didn't argue. I just nodded. Okay, Chloe. Be careful. The days leading up to it felt surreal. Picking out something to wear, not a ball gown, nothing fancy, just a simple, elegant dress that made me feel composed. Not hiding, but not trying to compete either. Just present. I saw Jessica at the grocery store a few days before. We hadn't spoken properly in years, not since she'd stopped calling. She saw me, her eyes widened, and she quickly turned her cart down another aisle. It stung a little, a reminder of how life had fractured. But compared to the gaping wound Daniel left, it was a paper cut. Saturday morning arrived with a nervous flutter in my stomach. Uncle Bill pulled up exactly at 8 a.m., his old sedan spotless. We packed a small bag. Chloe had her catering uniform hanging neatly in a garment bag. She seemed calmer than I felt, though I knew she was probably just better at hiding it. The drive was quiet. Uncle Bill didn't pepper me with questions, just talked about the weather and the annoying traffic. Chloe was on her phone, occasionally showing us a funny meme. It was like any other drive, superimposed with the knowledge that we were heading towards a confrontation with our past. As we got closer to the Ridgewood Grand Hotel, the cars got fancier, the hedges more manicured. The building itself was imposing, all stone and glass. Inside, the ballroom was exactly what you'd expect from someone determined to prove they'd won life. Crystal chandeliers hung like glittering tears from the high ceiling. White orchids lined everything. The air smelled faintly of lilies and money. It was a performance of perfection. My anxiety spiked the moment we walked through the door. My palms were sweaty, my breathing shallow. I felt like an imposter, dressed simply, a ghost from a less polished past intruding on this glittering future. Chloe squeezed my arm briefly before heading off towards the back, towards the service entrance, melting into the background of busy staff. Mike, a friendly-looking guy in a catering uniform, gave her a quick wave and a sympathetic nod. I hoped he'd look out for her. Uncle Bill guided me quietly towards the back corner, where we'd planned to sit. Out of the way, visible but not prominent. Just there. As we navigated the tables filling with arriving guests, I saw some faces I vaguely recognized, people who had known Daniel and me. Most looked away quickly, or offered a tight, awkward smile. Then I saw her. Aunt Carol. Daniel's mother's sister. She'd never been warm, always gave off a vibe of quiet disapproval. Our eyes met for a second, and she gave me a cold, deliberate look, turning her back to continue talking to her companions. It was a small thing, but it reinforced the feeling that I was definitely in enemy territory. And then I saw him. Daniel. Near the front, looking almost exactly the same, broad shoulders, that familiar, easy half-smile on his face as he shook hands with guests. He held a whiskey in the other hand, looking perfectly at ease, the picture of a successful man. If you didn't know him, you'd think he radiated warmth. But I knew the distance behind those eyes, the calculated charm he used like a shield. I knew what he looked like when the shield dropped, the hollow stare, the silence, the man who ran from sadness. And then I saw her. Victoria, the bride. All in white lace, gleaming blonde hair, her laughter just a little too loud, a little too bright. She clung to Daniel's arm, posing, radiating confidence and possession. Every movement seemed designed to say, "Look at what I have now. Look at what you couldn't keep." She was beautiful, in that polished, perfect way, the kind of beauty that seemed expensive and high maintenance. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. I kept my head down, focusing on the pattern of the tablecloth, the feel of Uncle Bill's solid presence beside me. Daniel's voice didn't waver when he said his vows. The applause after the kiss was deafening. They turned to face the guests, beaming like conquerors. Victoria looked utterly triumphant. Then the reception began. The air filled with the buzz of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the discreet movements of the waitstaff circulating with trays of appetizers. I sat quietly with Uncle Bill, sipping water, feeling like an anthropologist observing a strange, elaborate ritual. People laughed, gossiped, admired each other's outfits. It was a world away from the life Chloe and I had built, a world of quiet strength forged in the absence he left. I saw Chloe sometimes, weaving through the crowd with trays. She looked professional in her uniform, her curls pulled back neatly. We'd catch each other's eye for a split second, and she'd give me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod or a quick, reassuring glance. Mike, the coworker, looked over at her with a concerned expression a few times. The toast started. The best man, the maid of honor. Standard stuff about how great Daniel was, how perfect Victoria was for him, how they were meant to be. I was starting to tune it out, drifting into my own thoughts, when Victoria's voice cut through the din, sharper, clearer, demanding attention. "I wanted to say a few words," she announced, standing at the head table, raising her champagne flute. Her eyes sparkled in the light, but there was something hard and cold behind them. She didn't look at Daniel. She looked out at the crowd, her gaze sweeping over the room, and for a terrifying second, I thought she landed on me. "When I met Daniel," she began, her voice sweet but carrying, "he was a wonderful man, but he was a little lost. A little hurt." She paused for effect. Damaged, really. By someone who didn't know how to appreciate him. A woman who was, frankly, too broken to see how lucky she was. My blood ran cold. My skin flushed hot, then icy. The noise of the room seemed to fade away, her words echoing in the sudden, stunned silence around our table. Uncle Bill stiffened beside me. "She almost ruined him," Victoria continued, a light, dismissive laugh in her voice that sent shivers down my spine. "But I saved him. I healed him." She smiled, a dazzling, cruel smile. "And today, he's finally where he belongs." Then came the reaction. Laughter. Real laughter. From dozens of people. Guests raised their glasses, clinking them together in a toast to Victoria's cruel pronouncement. Some nodded, smiling like she'd just shared a hilarious anecdote. It wasn't just awkward social laughter. It felt like an endorsement. A collective agreement that yes, the woman before wasn't good enough, and this woman, Victoria, was the savior. I sat there frozen. My mind raced, flashing through years of memories Victoria knew nothing about. The nights I held Daniel's hand while he cried about the custody battle for Chloe. The mornings I woke up early to make him coffee and proofread cover letters for job applications. The ultrasound photo tucked away in a drawer, the one I still couldn't bear to frame or discard. She didn't save him. She just arrived after he'd already run away from his responsibilities, from his grief, from us. She arrived after he had already chosen the easy way out. Every instinct screamed at me to get up, to yell, to defend myself, to shatter her perfect little narrative. But I couldn't move. The shame, the pain, the sheer injustice of it pinned me to my seat. I just stared at her, this woman who had built her happiness on a foundation of lies and dismissal. Then, something shifted in my peripheral vision. Near the kitchen entrance, one of the waitresses had stopped moving. She was standing still, staring intently at Victoria. Her jaw was tight, her hands clenched into fists. It was Chloe. She took a deep breath, her shoulders squared. Then, shaking slightly but with an undeniable resolve, she stepped forward and began to walk. Through the tables, past the laughing guests, towards the head table. Mike, her coworker, watched her go, a look of proud worry on his face. The laughter died down as people noticed her, murmurs rising instead. She reached the center of the room, right near the microphone stand. She stopped, standing tall, her gaze fixed on Victoria. Slowly, deliberately, she reached up and removed her catering cap. She held it in her hand, her curls spilling loose around her face. And then, in a voice that cut through the hushed room like glass, she spoke. "I'm his daughter," Chloe said. Her voice was steady, clear. The room fell into absolute, stunned silence. Victoria's face went slack, drained of all color. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Daniel, at the head table, turned slowly in his seat, his eyes wide with disbelief and horror as he finally truly saw the girl in the server's uniform standing there. Chloe didn't stop. Holding the cap tightly in her hand, she looked out at the frozen guests, at Victoria, at Daniel, and added, her voice gaining power, "And I have something to say." The silence was electric. Confused. Every eye in the room was fixed on Chloe. The perfect, curated event had just been hijacked by reality in a black apron and white shirt. "She's not just some broken woman you're mocking," Chloe said, her voice trembling slightly but growing stronger with each word. She gestured towards me, sitting stunned at the back. "She's the woman who raised me, who loved me, who stayed when others left." Victoria blinked, still trying to process what was happening. "Wait, what?" "I'm Daniel's daughter," Chloe stated again, turning her gaze directly onto him. "From before. Before you met her. Before you decided we didn't fit into your life anymore. Before you pretended I didn't exist." A collective gasp swept through the guests. Whispers erupted, then were quickly hushed. I saw Aunt Carol, Daniel's aunt, look absolutely horrified, shrinking back in her seat. Jessica had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide. Chloe took a step forward, her voice gaining a raw, undeniable power. "This wasn't planned. This wasn't practiced. This was years of pain and truth pouring out. He left when I was 11, she continued, her voice cracking slightly. He didn't just leave my mom. He left me. No calls. No letters. Birthday cards I sent came back unopened. Emails ignored. He just disappeared." She looked at Victoria, who looked increasingly flustered and unsure of herself. "And you stand there in your perfect dress and call her broken? You say you saved him?" She turned back to the room, her gaze sweeping over the silent faces. "I watched her work 2 jobs, Chloe said, her voice rising. "So I could have food. So we wouldn't lose our apartment. I heard her crying, quiet so I wouldn't hear, after debt collectors called. And when kids at school asked about my dad, I said he was away on business. Because the truth, that he was alive and just chose not to be there, was too hard to explain." A few people near the front gasped audibly. A waiter froze, tray of glasses hovering midair. Daniel finally seemed to find his voice, a hushed, desperate plea. "Chloe, please, and not here." Chloe's head snapped towards him, her eyes flashing. "Oh, now you remember my name? Now that I'm ruining your perfect picture? You didn't remember my name when I was sending you those cards, did you?" Her voice was sharp, full of years of hurt. "You didn't remember when you were building this new life with her, letting her stand up here and call the woman who raised your daughter trash." He looked at me then, across the room, and for the first time since I'd arrived, his practiced facade cracked. There was guilt there. Shame. Exposure. But looking at him, I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel revenge. I felt a sudden, profound clarity. I wasn't the one who should be ashamed. He was. "She didn't break you, Daniel," Chloe said, turning back to him, her voice shaking but strong. "You broke yourself. And then you tried to bury us like we didn't exist, so you wouldn't have to face what you did." Victoria looked around wildly, her eyes darting for support, but found none. The guests were silent, uncomfortable witnesses. Victoria turned to Daniel, her voice a panicked whisper. "Daniel, is this true?" He couldn't answer. He just stared at Chloe, his daughter, standing there in her server's uniform, holding his carefully constructed world hostage with nothing but the truth. He looked at her like a stranger who had just walked into his dream life and revealed it was built on sand. Chloe didn't wait for an answer from him. She started walking towards me. Every step felt like a drumbeat in my chest. The stunned crowd parted for her again. Uncle Bill stood up beside me. She reached my seat, and I stood up too. She reached for my hand, and my fingers wrapped around hers. Her hand was shaking but firm. In that small gesture, something inside me that had been dormant, buried under layers of grief and shame, began to stir. Not rage, not bitterness. Something quieter, but infinitely stronger. Power. The quiet, resilient power of survival and chosen love. She didn't come here to fight, Chloe said, turning back towards the silent room, towards Victoria and Daniel. Her voice was calm, steady. She came because I asked her to. Because I wanted her to see. I wanted everyone to see that she doesn't need to hide anymore. She looked straight at Victoria, her gaze unwavering. She doesn't need to be invited into a room to belong in it. And no one gets to rewrite our story, the real one, to make themselves look better. The room held its breath. Victoria's hand trembled around her champagne flute. This is crazy, she mumbled, trying to regain some semblance of control. She's trying to ruin my wedding. Chloe's chin lifted, her expression hardening slightly. You ruined it, she stated simply, the second you built it on lies. Then, holding my hand tightly, she turned and walked away. Through the silent, stunned guests, Uncle Bill followed close behind us. Murmurs rose like smoke in our wake, whispers of shock and confusion. No one stopped us. No one dared. Behind us, I heard Daniel call out once, his voice broken. Chloe, but she didn't turn back. We walked out of the opulent ballroom, through the hushed lobby, and out into the cool night air. It had started to drizzle, but we barely noticed. The storm we just weathered couldn't be measured in raindrops. Chloe exhaled, a shaky breath, like she'd been holding it in for years. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes, but a small smile on her face. I wasn't going to let her do that, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Not after everything. Not after. You didn't have to do that, Chloe, I said, my own voice shaky. My eyes were stinging. Yes, she said, squeezing my hand. Yes, I did. You saved me, Mom. It was time I returned the favor. In that moment, standing there in the quiet drizzle outside that fancy hotel, I realized she was right. The strongest love stories aren't always romantic. Some are built in silence, in shared struggle, in healing. Some are born the moment a child decides to protect the person who never stopped protecting them. We hadn't even made it halfway down the long, covered walkway when someone behind us called out, sharp and panicked. Wait. Stop. It was Victoria. She'd followed us out, her perfect white dress trailing behind her, looking less like a bridal gown and more like a shredded symbol of her unraveling pride. Her perfect blonde curls were slightly damp from the drizzle, her mascara starting to smudge. For the first time that night, she looked real. And scared. Chloe stopped first, turning to face her. I stayed still, unsure what this woman could possibly say that would matter now. Uncle Bill stood silently behind us, a solid, watchful presence. You can't just do that. Victoria snapped, her voice high and shaky. You can't just hijack my wedding and humiliate us. Us? Chloe repeated, one eyebrow raised. Funny you say us. I didn't say anything that wasn't true. You could have handled it privately. Victoria accused, looking desperate. No, I said, stepping forward slightly, finding my voice, which was calm and steady now, surprising even myself. You could have handled it privately. You could have chosen not to stand up in front of everyone and try to turn me into a villain to make yourself look better. You made it public, Victoria. Victoria blinked, her eyes darting between Chloe and me, looking for some angle, some way to regain control, but finding none. I didn't know, she stammered. I didn't know he had a daughter. Did you ask? Chloe interrupted, her voice sharp. Or did you just believe the story that made you feel superior? The one where he was a victim and you were the hero. Victoria opened her mouth, but no words came out. Then Daniel appeared behind her, having followed too. His jacket was unbuttoned, his tie loose. His face wasn't composed or charming anymore. It was just exposed. Raw. Chloe, he said, his voice quieter this time, stripped of its artifice. I never meant for this to happen. Chloe turned to him fully, her expression unreadable for a second. Then she asked, her voice devoid of emotion, almost clinical, "Which part, Daniel? Me being born? You abandoning me for 10 years? Or just having to finally face it now, in front of all these people?" He flinched as if she'd struck him. "I thought I was protecting you," he mumbled, looking down at his feet. "Protecting you both. Protecting us?" I stepped forward again, meeting his gaze directly for the first time in years. The man who had been my life. The man who had broken us. By disappearing? By leaving a child who adored you. I shook my head slowly. I was broken too, Daniel. More broken than you can imagine. The world fell apart. But I didn't leave. I stayed. I picked up the pieces. You ran. And there it was. The simple, undeniable truth. No matter how he tried to spin it, how many years passed, he knew it was true. He ran. I stayed. "I can't take it back," he said quietly, looking utterly defeated. "No," I said, my voice gentle now, the anger replaced by a vast, tired understanding. "You can't." The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken history and lost possibilities. And then Chloe broke it. "You know what I used to tell myself?" she said, looking at Daniel, her voice soft, almost reflective. "When I was little, after you left, I used to tell myself you were dead. That maybe something happened to you. That's why you weren't here. Because the truth that you were alive and just didn't care enough to come back, that was worse." Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. He looked down at the ground again, at the path of choices that had led him here, exposed and ashamed in the damp night air. And then something happened I didn't expect. Chloe took a small step towards him. Not in anger. Not in longing. Just a step. She looked him in the eye, her expression calm, mature. "I forgive you," she said. Daniel looked up, startled, hope flickering in his eyes for a split second. "Not for you," Chloe clarified gently, shattering that fragile hope. "For me. Because carrying the weight of your absence, the anger, the questions, it's just too heavy now. I'm done carrying it." He swallowed hard, nodding once, his eyes glassy. You're incredible, Chloe," he whispered. "You know that." She smiled, a soft, sad smile that held immense strength. "I know," she said. And then she turned from him, stepped back towards me, and with a look of pure love and conviction, pointed to me. She made me that way. In that moment, that simple gesture, that quiet declaration, was louder than any microphone, any applause, any cruel toast. It was the truth laid bare. No glitter, no champagne, no forced smiles. Just a daughter choosing her mother. A family affirming itself in the face of the man who had left them both. Victoria stepped back, arms folded, her face a mask of bewildered anger. So what now? You just walk away and pretend you didn't just wreck everything." Chloe tilted her head, her expression serene. "You wrecked it, Victoria. The moment you tried to build it on lies about us." And I added softly, looking not at them, but out into the damp night, "If you wanted a perfect story, maybe you should have picked someone with nothing to hide." We turned our backs on them then, Victoria sputtering, Daniel silent and defeated. We walked together, the three of us, me, Chloe, and Uncle Bill, out into the night. The sky was wide and deep above us, the drizzle feeling cleansing. Uncle Bill was waiting by the car. He looked at us, then back at Daniel and Victoria standing frozen in the entryway, looking like characters from a play whose script had just been shredded. He nodded slowly. "Guess that's what you'd call a mic drop moment." Chloe laughed, a real, genuine laugh that sounded like music. I joined her, relief bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't forced. It was real. In that moment, standing there in the light rain, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because everything was fixed, not because Daniel finally understood what he lost, but because I knew who I was. Chloe knew who she was. And now, so did everyone else. We weren't the hidden, broken past. We were the visible, resilient present. The next morning, the echoes started. Not in newspapers, but in the way things spread now. Short, grainy clips on TikTok. Anonymous posts on Reddit. Waitress shuts down bride's insult. Short videos captioned epic wedding confrontation. I didn't watch them. I didn't need to. I had lived it. Messages started coming in. From friends I hadn't heard from in years. Some apologized for losing touch when things fell apart, admitting they hadn't known what to say or do. Others just said, I saw. You were incredible. Chloe was amazing. But the funny thing is, I didn't feel incredible. Not in the spotlight, not when Victoria was mocking me, and not even when Chloe stood up. I felt terrified. But then standing there with Chloe holding her hand, I just felt seen. And I felt like someone who had finally stopped trying to disappear. Daniel never called. No apology. No attempt to explain himself further. I think deep down he knew there was nothing left to explain. His story was written in the silence that followed his absence, and ours had just been written in sharp, clear strokes, right over his. We were done reading his version. Victoria's name popped up in the online gossip for a week or two, the punchline of her own lavish wedding. I heard from someone who knew someone at the venue that she left the reception early and never came back for the honeymoon send-off. Apparently, she moved out of Daniel's place within the month. Whether they officially broke up or just faded away, I didn't care. That story wasn't ours anymore. After that night, something fundamental shifted in our home. It was quiet, as always, but there was a powerful new current underneath. Chloe was different. Stronger. She walked taller. She didn't apologize for taking up space. I caught her practicing speaking in the mirror one night, not out of vanity, but practice. She told me she wanted to start a podcast, or maybe an online group, for other kids like her who felt like they didn't have a voice, whose stories had been ignored or rewritten. Mike from the catering gig even offered to help her set up the tech side. And me? I started something too. I'd always been afraid to talk publicly about what happened. There's a weird shame in being left, in being abandoned. People look at you like it might be contagious, like your pain is a warning sign. But after the wedding, after standing there with Chloe and reclaiming our truth, I realized something. I wasn't weak because I had been broken. I was strong because I rebuilt myself, piece by painstaking piece. So I started writing again. First just notes in a journal, then essays. I sent one to a parenting blog, not about Daniel specifically, but about finding strength after loss and abandonment, and the power of chosen family. It got published. The comments poured in. Messages from mothers, from daughters, from women I'd never met, all saying versions of the same thing. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. You told my story. That grew. From a single essay to a blog. From a blog to a small online community. A few months later, I took a leap of faith and registered a nonprofit. The Second Thread. A space for women healing from abandonment, divorce, emotional abuse. We host online support circles, share resources, offer creative writing workshops to help women literally and figuratively write their own stories. I never expected it to become what it did. I just wanted to offer women a space where silence wasn't the only option, where their pain didn't make them broken, and where rebuilding was seen as a triumph. But the most powerful part of all of this wasn't the public validation or the community. It was a quiet moment in our kitchen one cold January evening. I was washing dishes, the hot water soothing my hands. Chloe was sitting at the counter, legs swinging off the stool, flipping through one of her notebooks. She looked up at me, out of the blue. You know, she said softly, I used to wish my real mom hadn't left. My hands paused in the sink, dripping water onto the floor. But now, she continued, her voice thoughtful, now I get it. Maybe she left because I was supposed to end up with you instead. I couldn't speak, couldn't find the words. I just turned around, dried my hands on a towel, and walked over to her. I pulled her into a hug so tight I think I breathed her in. We stood there for a long moment, in the quiet kitchen, the sound of the running faucet the only noise. Sometimes, life doesn't give you the story you thought you wanted. Sometimes, it tears pages out mid-chapter and leaves you guessing the ending. But sometimes, when you hold on, when you love hard, when you stay even when everything tells you to run, you get something better than a fairy tale. You get to write a new story. A real one. About resilience, about chosen family, about finding your voice. And the best part? You don't need anyone's invitation or permission to start. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength or the power of someone who stood by you when others didn't, take a second and give this video a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear that broken doesn't mean worthless, that walking away doesn't make you strong. Staying and healing does. And if you've ever had to rebuild yourself, if you've ever been the one holding the pieces together when someone else dropped them, leave a comment. Tell us your story. You never know who's reading and needs your words. And hey, if you want more true stories that hit deep, that remind you you're not alone, make sure to subscribe to the channel. New stories drop every week, and they're all about resilience, truth, and the messy, beautiful, complicated business of being human. Thanks for watching, and remember, you don't need to be invited into someone else's story when you're already writing your own.